Leona Farouk lived for elegance, Omar Farouk lived for power, and Carmela Rivas lived in their shadows until one secret affair turned their golden life in Dubai into a buried nightmare. Leona Farouk had spent years perfecting her life. Every corner of her luxurious Dubai villa reflected her taste-ornate mirrors, silk curtains, and polished marble floors that gleamed under the Arabian sun. Her social media was a gallery of flawless brunches, designer gowns, and carefully posed smiles beside her husband, Omar Farouk. But behind the curated facade was a silent struggle, an aching sense of disconnection that had crept in like dust. On glass, Omar was growing distant. His business trips had become more frequent, his eyes colder, and his touch absent. Leona, originally from Casablanca, had married Omar 10 years ago. Back then, he was attentive, charming, and relentless in his ambition. His family was old money, with deep ties in real estate and finance. Over the years, he grew wealthier and more secretive. While Leona kept up appearances, she was no longer the center of his world. Omar had become a shadow in his own home, leaving early, returning late, and offering vague answers when questioned. He always had a reason, a board meeting, a last-minute flight, a power lunch, but never an explanation. When Carmela Rivas was hired as their new housemaid, Leona barely noticed her. The young Filipina girl was polite, quiet, and efficient. She rarely spoke unless spoken to and stayed out of sight. She cleaned quickly, made perfect beds, and always kept her head low. To Leona, she was just another fixture in the house, like the antique vases or the imported chandeliers. But something about her presence unsettled Leona in subtle ways. An occasional glance exchanged with Omar, a faint giggle in the hallway, or the way her perfume lingered in the air longer than it should. Within weeks of Carmela's arrival, Leona's unease deepened. She noticed one of her expensive lipsticks missing from her vanity. One of Omar's shirts had a tiny smear of makeup on the collar, barely noticeable, but to Leona, glaring. There were phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, and whispers behind closed doors that stopped the moment her heels tapped the hallway floor. Her instincts sharpened. She started keeping track of Carmela's movements, watching the clock when Omar was late, noting changes in his routine. Then came the final confirmation. A gold bracelet that Omar had gifted her on their second anniversary went missing. She searched everywhere: bedrooms, closets, drawers. Days later, she spotted the same bracelet on Carmela's wrist while the maid was dusting the hallway mirror. Leona said nothing. She didn't confront her. She needed proof. Determined, she installed a small hidden camera behind the large decorative mirror in the living room. She told no one, not even the staff. Every day, she reviewed the footage late at night when the house was silent and the city lights flickered through her bedroom curtains. For days, the video showed nothing unusual, just normal cleaning routines and occasional staff movements. But on the fifth night, the footage revealed a scene that froze her blood. Carmela entered the living room past midnight, barefoot and wearing a silk robe that didn't belong to her. Minutes later, Omar followed. There was no tension between them, only familiarity. They spoke briefly, stood close, and then disappeared into the guest room. The timestamp was unmistakable. It had happened right under Leona's nose, in her own home. While she slept upstairs, her heart sank. The betrayal wasn't just in the act, it was in the planning, the ease with which they carried on, the confidence that she would never suspect a thing. She replayed the footage multiple times, numb, then angry, then cold. Her marriage wasn't just crumbling. It had already collapsed. Now she had proof. But instead of exploding with rage, Leona made a decision that would change everything. She wouldn't confront Omar. She wouldn't fire Carmela. She would plan. She would watch. And she would wait for the perfect moment to strike, calm, composed, and devastating. The cracks in her marble mansion had become fault lines, and something deep beneath the surface was beginning to shift. The anniversary dinner was Leona's trap, perfectly set beneath layers of elegance and tradition. She planned it with exacting detail, calling it a celebration of 10 years of marriage, even though she knew every moment was built on betrayal. Invitations were sent to a select few longtime friends, business associates, and their neighbor, Rafiq Junaid. She wanted the night to appear normal, perhaps even joyful. Every choice, the floral arrangements, the gold-rimmed china, the choice of music was designed to maintain the illusion. Carmela was instructed to help with preparations. She ironed napkins, arranged candles, and ensured the crystal glasses sparkled. Leona watched her closely, studying her movements, noting her ease in the home. Omar, as expected, remained distant but civil, giving vague compliments and checking his phone often. He seemed distracted, unaware that the woman sitting across from him at the table already knew his secret. Guests arrived in luxury cars and were greeted with soft lights and chilled drinks. The villa shimmered, its silence masked by laughter and the clinking of cutlery. As the evening progressed, Leona held herself together with poise. She smiled when necessary, engaged in conversation, and toasted to her devoted husband while quietly measuring every second that passed. Omar didn't speak much during dinner, and Leona noticed him exchanging quick glances with Carmela each time she entered the room to serve. The others didn't notice or pretended not to. Only Rafiq, the neighbor and family friend, seemed unusually observant. He studied Omar, his eyes narrowing occasionally as though piecing together a puzzle of his own. After dessert, the guests mingled in the courtyard under warm fairy lights. Carmela was excused to her quarters. Leona stayed behind, slowly cleaning up the dining area. She was calm, almost detached. When the last guest left and the villa doors closed behind them, the silence became thick. Leona walked into the living room and placed a small envelope on the coffee table where Omar could not miss it. Inside was a printed photo from the hidden camera footage, grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. Omar and Carmela standing too close, locked in betrayal. Omar found the envelope minutes later. He didn't call for Leona. He didn't shout. Instead, he walked into his office, closed the door, and didn't come out. Leona sat in her bedroom, listening for footsteps, arguments, confessions, anything. But the house remained silent. The next morning, Omar was nowhere to be found. His car keys and wallet were still in the foyer. His phone was gone. Carmela claimed she hadn't seen him since the night before. She said he had seemed tired and went to his office to rest. Leona feigned concern and called a few of his colleagues. None of them had heard from him. By evening, she called the police. When the Dubai police arrived, Leona explained that Omar had disappeared after their anniversary dinner. She presented herself as a worried wife, confused and desperate for answers. The officers conducted a basic sweep of the property. No signs of forced entry, no blood, no signs of struggle. Everything was pristine, too pristine. The home was cold with silence, as if it had absorbed the secrets it now sheltered. Carmela remained in the background, her hands shaking slightly, her eyes avoiding everyone. She answered all questions with short, controlled responses. She said she had gone to bed early, hadn't spoken to Omar, and didn't hear anything unusual. As night fell once again over the Farouk villa, uncertainty took root. The story Leona spun was tight. The house held no obvious clues. But underneath the marble floors and designer furniture, something was festering. Omar was missing. Leona appeared calm. Carmela looked terrified. And the police, sensing the strange energy inside the home, knew this was no ordinary disappearance. It was the beginning of something far more sinister. Detective Harith Momen had handled numerous missing person cases, but something about the Farouk file felt different from the start. Omar Farouk wasn't just a businessman. He was a man tied to influence, wealth, and silence. When powerful men disappeared in Dubai, questions followed, but answers were rarely volunteered. Still, Harith was known for his patience and his instinct to read between the lines. He arrived at the Farouk residence 3 days after the disappearance was reported. From the outside, the villa was immaculate white stone, tall gates, and perfectly trimmed hedges. Inside, however, Harith sensed tension, not grief. Leona greeted him with practiced grace, offering tea and a seat in the expansive living room. She repeated her story. Omar left the dining area after a quiet conversation and never returned. She hadn't seen him since. Harith asked to see the office where Omar was last believed to be. The room was locked. Leona said she didn't have the key. It took the locksmith 10 minutes to gain access. The office was undisturbed, documents neatly stacked, a glass of untouched water on the desk, the faint scent of cologne still in the air. But Omar's phone, laptop, and favorite watch were gone. A deliberate disappearance or carefully staged? Carmela Rivas was called into the room for questioning. Harith had expected a timid, frightened maid, but what he saw was something more complex. Carmela was nervous, yes, but there was a layer of control beneath her fear. She kept her answers brief, insisting she had gone to bed early and had no interaction with Omar that evening. She avoided eye contact and often repeated herself. Harith noted the slight tremble in her voice, but also how rehearsed she sounded. He asked for Carmela's documents. Everything seemed in order, but Harith wasn't satisfied. A quick call to immigration revealed a discrepancy. Carmela had entered Dubai under her real name, but in the Philippines, her record showed a former employer who had also disappeared years ago under unclear circumstances. That case had been closed due to lack of evidence, but the timing was unsettling. Still, suspicion was not proof. Harith ordered forensic scans of the house. Cadaver dogs were brought in. The results were inconclusive. No blood, no trace evidence, no body. The villa was too clean. As if someone had anticipated an investigation and removed every detail that could point to foul play. Then came the breakthrough. One of the junior officers found prints on the doorknob of Omar's locked office. Among them, Carmela's stood out. She had earlier claimed she had never entered the room. When confronted, she hesitated and then claimed she once cleaned the office weeks ago, though Leona later contradicted that, saying the room had been off-limits to the staff. Harith decided to have her quarters searched. Tucked behind a tile near the edge of the ceiling was a burner phone, cheap, untraceable, but active. Its contents were minimal. No photos, no videos. Just a string of text messages, many deleted, and one chilling entry that remained. He said no. I have no choice. Now. The timestamp matched the night of the anniversary dinner. The phone had been communicating with a local number, which was registered under a false identity. Harith was now certain that Carmela wasn't just a bystander. But was she the mastermind? Or was she being used? Leona, meanwhile, appeared composed. Too composed. Harith had seen grief, denial, and panic in wives of missing men before. Leona was showing none of these. Instead, she carried herself with a cold calmness that hinted at control rather than confusion. The pieces were there, but they didn't fit just yet. Omar's body was still missing. Carmela's involvement was unclear, and Leona's perfection was starting to look like a mask. Harith left the villa that day with a quiet certainty. This wasn't the story of a missing man. This was the story of a buried truth. And the deeper he dug, the darker it became. 10 days after Omar Farouk vanished, the case took a grim turn. It began with a routine landscaping project. Workers had been hired to install a new irrigation system in the Farouk's garden, an elegant stretch of roses and imported palms at the back of the villa. Leona had ordered the update herself, insisting the garden needed a fresh look. The timing raised eyebrows among investigators, but it wasn't until a shovel struck something solid beneath the soil that suspicions were confirmed. Wrapped in a heavy plastic tarp, buried under less than 2 feet of dirt, was the body of a man in a disheveled kandura. His face was partially decomposed from the summer heat, but a quick forensic examination identified him as Omar Farouk. The scene was methodically concealed. No blood, no personal belongings, just the body, stripped of his wedding ring, and watch. News of the discovery spread quickly. The villa was locked down. Leona, who had been sipping tea on the balcony when police arrived, didn't react with panic. She simply stood, watched the commotion unfold, and remained silent. She was taken into custody within the hour. At the precinct, Leona denied everything. She said she had no knowledge of the body in her garden, suggested it was planted there to frame her, and pointed the finger at Carmela. She accused the maid of seducing her husband, manipulating him, and possibly killing him out of obsession. It was a sharp turn in narrative, calculated, cold, and deliberate. Carmela, on the other hand, fell apart. When presented with the news that Omar's body had been found, she wept uncontrollably. But she still refused to confess to any involvement in his death. Her only words were that she was scared, that she made a mistake trusting the wrong people. That statement, vague as it was, triggered a deeper review of her phone records and the burner device recovered from her room. The mysterious number Carmela had been texting was traced through a labyrinth of unregistered SIM cards and dummy accounts. Eventually, investigators found a connection to a prepaid number used by none other than Rafiq Junaid, the neighbor and longtime family friend who had attended the anniversary dinner. Rafiq had known Leona for years. Some whispered they had once been close, possibly more than friends. But nothing had ever been proven. When confronted with this discovery, Rafiq initially denied everything. But under pressure, his story began to unravel. Investigators found security footage from his own home showing Carmela visiting him late at night on at least 2 occasions. They also discovered a bank transfer made from an account linked to Omar to a foreign account associated with Rafiq transferred. Just days before Omar vanished, forensics revealed something else. The plastic tarp used to wrap Omar's body had the same manufacturer code as a set of gardening supplies recently purchased by Rafiq. When his car was searched, traces of soil matching the Farouk's backyard were found in the trunk. Faced with mounting evidence, Rafiq broke. He admitted to helping dispose of Omar's body, claiming he did it at Leona's instruction. He said she called him after a fight between her and Omar turned violent. According to Rafiq, when he arrived, Omar was already dead. Leona begged him to help hide the body. In return, she promised financial help enough to clear his debts and restart his failed business. Leona, however, told a different story. She insisted Rafiq acted alone, possibly out of jealousy or resentment, and used her as a pawn. She maintained that Carmela had betrayed them both by leading Omar into destruction. It was a web of lies, finger-pointing, and partial truths. The most damning evidence was yet to emerge: a piece of digital audio, unintentionally recorded by Leona's smartwatch. Hidden among hours of fitness tracking and ambient noise was a chilling clip from the night of the anniversary dinner. A woman's voice, calm and unmistakably Leona's, was heard instructing someone to wrap it tight and make sure it looks like he left. The recording ended with a whispered, "No one will ever find him." With that, the puzzle began to form a clearer picture. The betrayal had run deeper than an affair. The motive wasn't just love or revenge, it was control, image, and the desire to erase humiliation. And now, with a body buried in the garden and secrets pouring out of every corner, the truth was impossible to hide. The release of the smartwatch recording sent shockwaves through the investigation. For weeks, Leona Farouk had maintained her innocence with unwavering calm, insisting she had nothing to do with her husband's death. But now, with her voice captured giving explicit instructions on concealing a body, the facade of innocence collapsed. The audio was clear, the timeline matched, and the tone in her voice lacked any trace of panic. It was the voice of someone in control. Leona was formally charged with the murder of Omar Farouk and obstruction of justice. But the police weren't ready to close the case just yet. Too many questions remained unanswered, especially the role of Carmela and Rafik, whose involvement, while obvious, lacked clarity on who had pulled the strings. Carmela remained in custody, but her charges were downgraded. She was now viewed less as the primary killer and more as a manipulated accomplice, someone caught in a web of deceit, spun by people with far more power than she ever had. Through her tears and confusion, a new story began to emerge. According to Carmela, her relationship with Omar had started with harmless flirtation. She admitted to feeling flattered by his attention, especially given how isolated she had felt in the Farouk household. But things escalated quickly. Omar began buying her gifts, offering her money, and making promises he never intended to keep. Carmela fell into the illusion of security, thinking he would one day take her away from servitude. But those promises soured when she discovered he had no intention of leaving Leona. Feeling betrayed and exposed, Carmela confided in the only person she thought she could trust, Rafik Junaid. She had known him briefly through errands for Leona, and he had always been kind to her. But Rafik had his own agenda. His bitterness toward Omar and his lingering obsession with Leona made him a dangerous ally. Rafik saw an opportunity in Carmela's vulnerability. He encouraged her to confront Omar, even offering to help her gather proof of the affair for leverage. But what began as blackmail quickly spiraled into something darker. On the night of the anniversary dinner, Carmela delivered the envelope to Leona at Rafik's suggestion. Rafik had convinced her that exposing Omar would bring her justice and finally push Leona to break away from him. Instead, it led to murder. Investigators later confirmed that Rafik had entered the villa late that night, using a spare key he had kept from a previous renovation project. His fingerprints were found on the back gate. What happened next was pieced together through forensic evidence, phone records, and the smartwatch recording. Omar had confronted Leona after receiving the photo. He threatened to leave her, strip her of her lifestyle, and file for divorce. In a fit of fury, Leona struck him with a heavy marble sculpture from the office shelf. The blow was fatal. Panicked, she called Rafik. He arrived within minutes, and together, they cleaned the scene, moved the body to the garden, and buried it beneath freshly turned soil. The murder weapon was later discovered dumped in the Dubai Creek, located after. Rafik led investigators to it in exchange for a reduced sentence. Leona's trial drew national attention. The courtroom was packed daily as the details of greed, betrayal, and manipulation unfolded. Her defense tried to paint her as a woman pushed to the edge by infidelity and humiliation, but the jury was unmoved. She was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. Rafik received 15 years for his role in concealing the crime and tampering with evidence. Carmela, having cooperated with investigators and proven her fear and manipulation, served a short sentence for obstruction and was deported after her release. The Farouk villa was eventually sold. Stripped of its art and memories, new owners tried to remove the stain of tragedy, but in Dubai's elite circles, the story lingered. It became a cautionary tale whispered at garden parties and private dinners, a reminder that perfection is often an illusion, and behind the gates of luxury, deadly secrets can grow like weeds beneath the roses.